session. I commend on first session. It was actually a very interesting session. A vivid picture of different scenarios were given, and the situations were actually very difficult situations also. And the points to be taken care of are one, when there is a meconium staining of the liquor, meconium staining of liquor, that is not about the previous case where there was a cesarean section was decided, but then there was delay in giving anesthesia. But then the obstetrician has to insist on the situation and the baby to be taken out on an emergency basis. In that situation, definitely a general anesthesia is that what is indicated. And that I think the obstetrician has to insist. But sometimes the anesthesiologist may not be very much receptive also. That is also there. That is one about the meconium and the previous cesarean section. And many a times when you keep the cases for previous cesareans for vaginal deliveries, yes, continuous monitoring is important. In all cases, continuous ETG is important. And then again, in preterm labor also, madam was discussing about oligoamnios, ST, the variability and the decelerations. As in any other case, we have to be more vigilant in such situations. The topic is open for discussion. And any questions? Any questions in the chat box? I don't know. And about Dr. Samatram's presentation, as usual, he comes out with new ideas and new ventures. And you have clearly given a picture on how to manage the patient with meconium stained amniotic fluids and new interventions, and how he manages to deliver the baby in a good condition. And isosuprin is being used as an infusion. So questions can be, I think if there are questions that can be entertained now.
Yes, Dr. Rao.
Yes. Yes, I have a question.
Do the amniocentesis before an induction of labor?
Yeah, that is what I was going to ask also.
I know very well all of you will ask this question.
I was going to ask the same question.
Yes, very question I know is invasive. But I was doing work on amniotic fluid optical density and labor in a research work. And we used to take the samples. And what we found out was about 8 to 10% of the patients, they have meconium stained liquor, even without labor pains, even with the diminished fetal movements. And they simply came to OP. And for maturity reasons, I took the sample. It is different grades of meconium is there. And this is my observation. I see other thing, morning when very thin meconium, I think nothing will happen. By the time when I took the patient in the night, there's a thick meconium stained liquor and with fetal decelerations, everything. So it is a very important thing because about 8 to 10% of the babies have meconium stained liquor before the onset of spontaneous labor. Something must be done. Something must be done to solve this problem. Otherwise, this patient, if would have gone home, if the patient would have gone home and might have come back with in IUD.
But how do you convince the patient that you want to do an amnio?
Convincing, that's what I'm telling. I have done this work, this is a research work I have done, and I found out even in the previous old papers, this information is there. And actually, I am doing now transvaginal sonography to find out the functional maturity of the fetus by Wernicke's floater densities. In fact, I tell you, when I try to differentiate meconium clumps with that of Wernicke's clumps, it is very difficult. It is a problem, definitely is a problem. Something must come out. Even the MRI, even ultrasound cannot make the this meconium stained liquor.
So this research you are doing on optical density, I mean, you're still carrying on, it's an ongoing thing?
It is almost over now. Today we have come out something totally new now. In the sense, we do a transvaginal sonography and assess the maturity of the fetus. And it's a programmed labor we are doing. Today we do a transvaginal sonography, decide that she's going to, we know very clearly well that she will go for, that is ready for labor. Next day morning will trigger labor. Other advantage, how I'm able to prevent this meconium aspiration syndrome is, if we select the patient with the mature 4-water scanning densities and trigger labor, within 4 hours, within 4 to 5 hours, we can have a 5 centimeter dilatation of cervix, and it is painless.
How?
This is happening. This is what we are doing, because
That is,
by the time the optical density is mature, every system is ready. Cervix is ready, uterus is ready, vagina is ready, everything is ready. Only trigger labor, that's all. Then after 4 centimeters, we do an ARM, and if there is a meconium, we can rule out. Our job is only to monitor for 3 to 4 hours only. Within this 3-4 hours, if we can strictly monitor, you can avoid so many problems, including meconium aspiration syndrome.
How do you take an informed consent for all this?
They are with me. We take consent and all. People are there. I have published these papers. These publications are there. Recently also one paper was published.
yeah.
International journal is published. And see, this should be propagated. I'm struggling hard to propagate this. It should, somebody, senior people like you people should come out. If you do 1 or 2 cases, 10 cases, no, you will definitely do not leave it. Totally all
Sir,
my,
with PCPNDT, there is a lot of problem with amniocentesis and all.
that is,
So
no,
that
we
is
have, I have done,
I think.
yes, I have
like
done.
what madam is asking about the informed consent and
Okay,
this
that
regarding
should be done.
the challenges where, because if you do an amniocentesis, and especially if you are having a machine which is, you know, portable type of machine, always a problem. So definitely in your research setup, it may be possible, but even we have problem in doing amnio infusions, you know, that is a problem. So I think these challenges are always there, but of course yours is a research setting and we would like to know what are the results. Definitely you'll be publishing them.
Yes, I have already published. It's already there in the net. You can see them, and they are very useful. And see, actually, we are able to totally avoid deliveries during night. All programmed labors only we are doing. It's only a matter of it should spread. And question is, this all ethics, values, guidelines, everything are made to save the interest of the patient. And when you lose the baby, nobody will spare us. That's the thing. Because this information I'm giving you is a different information. It is there in net. It is there available in other papers also. And they should be taken into consideration, because bigger institutions, they have got neonatologists, NICU, so many things are there. Baby becomes distressed. They simply hand over the patient to neonatologist. Their job is over. But in small settings, it is difficult. You are answerable to everything. That is the reason why we are doing.
Sir, may I ask one thing?
Please.
In how many cases you have used this isoxysuprine just to, and what was your results? Is it in any guideline?
This paper has been published. I've been using this more than 15 years. Not 1, 2, thousands.
But sir, for the first time I have listened in. It is
maybe,
very, yeah.
Maybe, might be, but you try this. Is very useful, safe, very safe. Very safe.
As Dr. Surekha presented a case when the patient was shifted to OT, it was a big contraction, and by that, during that 15 minutes time, when the spinal anesthesia was installed, for the 3 sittings, they could not be able to hear the FHS, and ultimately they delivered the baby in a very bad shape. So at that time, can we use it?
I would like to say one thing. I have heard all her cases, 7 cases. Yeah. All 7 cases I would have used low-dose isox.
Yeah.
All 7 cases I would have used low-dose isox. I would not have lost a single.
Dr. Surekha, now you should go for this research. If really this is help, this is very good for us. 10 ml,
yeah, actually we would like to, this sir has given us some thought
some
process,
hope.
Food for thought. Yes. And what I presented are cases which are already published. One of the cases is from Dr. Arul Kumaran's case I have presented. One case I have presented from NHS, wherein the anesthesia, during anesthesia, there was delay and the baby was hypoxic. And these are all, presented so that we can think over, and such situations we do find in our practice also, where one cesarean section is going on, another is in line, and we are not getting a table, and all those kind of things are there. So how to monitor in this setting? See, when the patient is in the ward in control condition, it's a different matter. But once she's shifted in the OT, definitely the monitoring becomes difficult and little erratic also. So that is the time period when we have to think how to monitor. And we have seen patients who have gone in bradycardia and hypoxic. So I think these are the situations where we need food for thought, and find these are challenges which we need to address. And giving an isoxaprine in diluted dose, because sir, we would also like to know, because the volume of fluid which you give, whether there's a problem with the volume.
No, absolutely no problem, because only 2-3 points we give, and the dose is small dose. And the thing is, because fluids are running fast, they will get excreted by kidney very fast. The half-life period of
running fast means
160 drops per minute. It is too much.
No,
You have to just run it.
no, then only it will open the uteroplacental perfusions. Then only feed chart improves.
Some contraindications may be there for this fast running drip, sir.
So if such things are there, we have to think of that. That's what I said, within the cardiovascular reserve. That one word I have used. And we see, when woman is posted for C-section with severe fetal distress and all, what we do, we run it and get ready. Along with the drip, it will go to the OT. Till the anesthetist is ready to put a needle, this drip will be going. Just we disconnect the drip, and that put her on 1 pint of isotonic fluid without isoxaprine. Then we give spinal. Nothing will happen.
Sir, we always discontinue the oxytocin drip, and we give the plain fluid. But we have never given this isoxaprine.
You please give only 10 milligrams, not much. 10 milligrams of isoxaprine, and you try this. You will really understand what it is.
Dr. Surekha will do it, and she will let us know.
Yes. You can give me feedback. You can give me feedback.
That is what, when I was listening to you, I was also going through all the cases of Dr. Surekha which she presented. Then I thought कि in many of the cases, in the twin case, sir, जहाँ पे एक deliver हो गया, दूसरे में वो था थोड़ा सा, तो there it might be given. I don't know. Till you don't use it, you can't say anything. Because most of the time we have to go for the second twin of the Caesar. I have done at least 3 or 4 times.
But one thing, when there is a scope to improve and there is a scope to save the life, we should always try to do the best possible for the baby and the mother, Always we should try to do. When the technique is there, if technique is not there, when we don't know, we are losing the patient, we lose the patient. We can't help it, So
very nice. All the cases, Dr. Surekha, you presented were very nice.
Yeah. Very nice. And I
thank you,
have a
ma'am.
doubt. One case, madam.
You don't have to
madam.
see only the cervical dilatation and go on pushing this oxytocin. You have to look for the uterine contractions also. Once you will increase the uterine contraction, dilatation will not be there, then you are creating the baby to another risk yourself. That is not proper. And most of the time it happens, especially in the doctors who are not very much.
Hello, Dr. Surekha. I was going to ask about the same case which madam was discussing. PROM for 36 hours and oxytocin was pushed.
Yeah, this is actually Professor Arul Kumaran's case from his and that I have actually illustrated just to highlight the detrimental effects of oxytocin, using this kind of oxytocin augmentation without even paying attention to what is the happening, just because there is no progress, the cervix is not getting dilated, you're just increasing the oxytocin, you're not even looking at how many contractions are there. So that should be avoided, and we have to discourage such kind of practices. And I think a few days back we had a discussion on such kind of case where oxytocin was given and there was a rupture uterus. So
Yes.
basically, I just put that case to highlight how this oxytocin misuse has to be stopped. And once you find a pathological trace, then you
Yes.
have to interpret it correctly, and appropriate timely management is so important so that you do not lose any baby. You know, having a baby who's having such kind of hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, that baby may have a life, but that baby is already spoiled. You know,
Yeah.
nobody can forgive you for that abuse of oxytocin in such a case. So that's why I highlighted that case, and it is very well published and it has been discussed. But I wanted to put it on this forum that when you have any trace you have which is pathological or suspicious, you have to overview the complete case again. What is happening? And like, suppose if there are tachysystole, hypercontractibility is there, then you have to do something about it. As Dr. Ram has already said, if you it is your responsibility actually to save this baby, to be alert. And if you have a CTG, okay, fine. If you don't have a continuous monitoring also, you can do an intermittent CTG. You can auscultate also and find out if there are problems. But just increasing the oxytocin will not work.
Will not work. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, madam, for putting that case. And another case important is that case 37 weeks, rupture of membranes, previous cesarean, abruption, PPH.
Yeah, that patient
deceleration.
also, she was not having any activity as such. Okay,
Okay.
but typical, the previous cesarean section, waiting in the wards only, and no activity, still severe abdominal pain. So if you would have just neglected that severe abdominal pain, then we would not have diagnosed that there is a something wrong in this patient. That pathological trace with the decelerations actually gave us the idea about what is happening, and we could do the cesarean section and save the baby. So again, you know, if you have resources, then how to use those resources for the betterment of your patient, that is important. So you have to decide which patients require what kind of resource. So if it's a high volume kind of setup where you cannot do admission city for everybody, you cannot do electronic fetal monitoring for everybody. So you have to decide upon your clinical finding which patients require CTG, which patients require continuous monitoring. If not, you have to allocate your resources properly. If you have only few number of residents who can monitor, then which patients needs close monitoring, which patients can be monitored at intervals, that you have to decide. So I think like madam has already said, Asmita madam, we may not do an admission test for everybody, but your clinical evaluation will tell us which patient requires that admission test and which patient requires the intermittent CTG if you don't have an electronic continuous monitor. That also I wanted to give a message.
Very nice, very nice.
madam.
Both the lecture, बहुत बढ़िया था. It was really eye-opening. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you,
Very
madam.
interesting.
Aswati
Very
has something to
interesting.
say.
Thank you, dear faculty, for all the wonderful sessions. And it is 5 and it is time